got up there and I saw that the ball wasn't buried, I said, Mark, I said, we still have a chance if we can get the ball up and down. Actually, I thought Greg's ball was on the green, and, it's just a shot that you practice, and it went in the hole.
We're excited for you, Bobby. We know it's a great moment for you. You're going to be a great champion, your first major win, and like Al said, to come down to the wire with Greg, it's just fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Great going.
Thank you.
Once said Bob Tway was nuts, and not in a good way. But here's the thing, when 5 legends start treating you like a punching bag on tour, maybe the problem isn't just bad luck. Maybe it's you. This isn't a story about rivalry. This is a story about a man who won a major championship with one miracle shot, and then spent the next 19 years being psychologically tortured by the ghosts of greatness. By the end, you'll understand why Bob Tway's career might be the saddest story in modern golf. Let's start with the man who broke Bob Tway before his career even really began. Greg Norman. In 1986, Norman wasn't just good. He was the benchmark. He was world #1. His bold, aggressive style intimidated professionals across the entire tour. That year, Norman achieved something called the Saturday Slam. He led all 4 major championships after 54 holes, every single one. That's not dominance, that's suffocation. When you're competing against a guy who leads every major after 3 rounds, you're not just playing golf, you're fighting against a force of nature. So, when Bob Tway found himself in the final pairing of the 1986 PGA Championship, tied with Norman going into the last round, he was staring down the era's most terrifying force. Norman had built a reputation that went beyond his golf game. He was the great white shark, relentless, powerful, hungry. Every player on tour knew that when Norman had the lead, you needed something extraordinary to beat him. What happened next should have been Tway's crowning glory. Instead, it became his curse. Norman had a 4-shot lead. He was cruising. Through 10 holes, that cushion was still intact. The tournament looked over, then the wheels fell off. Norman double bogeyed the 11th. He bogeyed the 14th. Suddenly, Tway was tied. The pressure shifted. The tournament was wide open. On the 72nd hole, Tway's ball landed in a greenside bunker. Downhill lie, green sloping away. It looked impossible. What happened next was one of golf's most memorable moments. Tway swung. The ball floated about a foot onto the green, then rolled straight into the cup. He leaped like a schoolboy in the sand, pumping his fists in pure shock. The crowd erupted. Norman must have wondered what had hit him. But here's the poison. Here's where the torture began. Tway later admitted something devastating. He said, "I wasn't trying to make it. I was just trying to get it close to the hole. For it to go in was unbelievable." Think about that. His greatest triumph, the shot that won him a major championship, wasn't skill. It was luck. It was a miracle he couldn't explain or repeat. This wasn't Jack Nicklaus draining a putt he'd practiced 1,000 times. This wasn't Raymond Floyd executing a shot under control. This was pure chance. A fluke. Lightning in a bottle. Years later, Golf Digest brought Tway back to that same bunker for an instruction feature. He tried 20 times. He didn't make a single one. Not one. The shot that defined his career was so improbable that even he couldn't do it again when it didn't matter. But the real torture wasn't the shot itself. It was what happened immediately after. The press conference should have been about Tway's miracle. Instead, every question went to Norman. They asked about his bottle. They asked about the monkey on his back. They wanted to know if he could handle the pressure. The story wasn't Tway's miraculous win. It was Norman's tragic loss. The narrative was hijacked before Tway could even enjoy it. Tway harpooned the great white shark, but he was instantly reduced to being the instrument of Norman's torture, not the hero of his own story. He'd won his first major, and somehow he still felt like a supporting character. Norman was magnanimous in defeat, but he left in a gloomy mood. The attention followed him, not the champion. And then came the final insult, the ultimate psychological dagger. Despite winning 4 tournaments that year, despite winning the PGA Championship, despite being named Player of the Year, Tway finished second on the money list. Norman finished first. The gap between them? $516. Let me say that again. $516. Tway had his perfect season. He won the peer-voted Player of the Year award. His fellow professionals recognized him as the best. But Norman won the cold, hard cash prize, the objective measurement. Even in Tway's best year ever, he was still, in the end, second to the man he supposedly beat. This cemented a brutal psychological hierarchy. Tway could beat Norman on a given day, but he could never be Norman. He could never fully escape the shadow of the man he'd defeated. That $516 gap became the defining symbol of Tway's entire career, not his Player of the Year trophy, not his major championship. A gap so small you could earn it with a few good finishes, yet so psychologically massive it might as well have been $1 million. It told Tway that even at his absolute peak, he was still chasing someone else. Greg Norman's collapse might have given Bob his biggest win, but in a twisted way, it also gave him his biggest curse. What would you have done if your entire career got defined by one lucky shot? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe if you love these deep dives into golf's craziest rivalries. Before Tway ever faced Norman, he had already set himself up for failure, and the man responsible was Bernhard Langer. In February 1986, Tway got his first ever PGA Tour victory at the Andy Williams Open. Bad weather reduced the event to 54 holes. Tway found himself in a playoff, and his opponent, Bernhard Langer. This wasn't just any player. player. Langer was the reigning 1985 Masters champion. Just 2 months later, he would become the first ever player to hold the official world golf ranking of #1, the best player in the world, and Tway in his first career win had to go through him to get it. He beat him in a 2-hole playoff with a par. On paper, this looks incredible. A young gun taking down the king. In reality, it was a curse. A psychological trap that would haunt Tway for years. Beating the world's best player in your very first win set an impossibly high standard. Tway proved he could defeat a legend in a high-pressure, head-to-head situation right out of the gate. The problem? That set expectations he could never maintain. It's like a rookie quarterback winning the Super Bowl in his first season. Where do you go from there? Every game after that becomes a potential disappointment. It was like winning an Oscar for your first movie. Sure, it's an achievement, but now everyone expects you to be that good every time. And when you're not, the questions start. What happened? Why aren't you dominant anymore? Did you get lucky the first time? Tway's first win locked him into a psychological trap. He'd arrived too fast, and the pressure to stay there would eventually crush him. Every tournament after that, people expected him to beat the best. When he didn't, it felt like failure. Langer didn't need to hate Tway. He didn't need to say a word. He'd already done the damage by being too good too early. By forcing Tway to start his career at the top of the mountain instead of climbing it gradually, Langer guaranteed that the only direction Tway could go was down. 2 months after beating Langer, Tway arrived at the 1986 Masters. He was in serious contention. He entered the final round tied for 9th, just 4 strokes off the lead. He played beautifully, shooting a final round 70 and finishing tied for 8th. Under normal circumstances, that's a triumph. A top 10 finish at Augusta in your first Masters appearance? That's a career highlight for most players. But nothing about the 1986 Masters was normal, because playing right behind Tway was Jack Nicklaus. The 46-year-old legend was diminished, past his prime, written off by most of the golf world. People thought his time was over. Then he charged from behind and shot a back 930 to win his 6th green jacket. It was one of the most iconic moments in golf history, a triumph of will and experience over time and age. And Bob Tway? He had a front row seat to his own irrelevance. Tway was in the group right in front of Nicklaus. As Nicklaus made his legendary charge, Tway could hear everything. He sensed from the crowd that it was Jack. The spine-tingling cheers erupted behind him, wave after wave of sound. Tway later recalled, "The roars on 17, it's almost like the clubhouse shook. Imagine that. You're playing championship-caliber golf. You're shooting 70 in the final round of the Masters. You're in the top 10, and all you can hear is the ground shaking for someone else. Every roar is a reminder that no matter how well you play, you'll never be the story. You'll never be the legend. You're just background noise in someone else's fairy tale." Nicklaus didn't need to say a word to Tway. The roars did all the talking. They sent an inescapable message. Your excellence is meaningless. You don't matter. No matter how good your round is, no matter how well you execute, the crowd will always love someone else more. The force of Nicklaus's will, amplified by the crowd, psychologically annihilated the field. Tway learned that day that he could play great and still be a footnote. That kind of psychological torture doesn't just sting. It lingers. It festers. It changes how you see yourself on the course. If Nicklaus taught Tway that greatness renders you invisible, Raymond Floyd taught him something worse. He showed Tway exactly what he was missing: mental toughness, iron will, the ability to turn failure into fuel. And he did it in the cruelest way possible by providing a direct, real-time comparison. At the 1986 U.S. Open at Shinnecock Hills, Tway was in prime position. He led after the first round. The media loved the story. Young gun with momentum taking on the old guard. He entered the final round just 2 strokes back. This was his moment. His chance to prove the PGA wasn't a fluke. His chance to show he could win the toughest test in golf. Then he fell apart. Tway was in contention until the final 9 holes. Then he double bogeyed the par 5 16th. He took a 7 on that hole. A par 5 where he should have been making birdie, maybe even eagle. Then he bogeyed the 17th. Back-to-back disasters. He plummeted to another tied for 8th finish. Another top 10 that felt like a failure. Meanwhile, 43-year-old Raymond Floyd was putting on a clinic in mental fortitude. Floyd was known as a tough competitor, someone with steely mental toughness. But even he had struggled. He'd collapsed the week before at Westchester. A bad performance that could have shaken anyone. But instead of spiraling, Floyd used it. He and his wife dissected that failure. They turned it into a lesson. They found the mental errors and corrected them. Floyd consciously changed his lousy attitude about the U.S. Open. He stopped seeing it as a burden and started seeing it as an opportunity. Then, in the final round, he shot a flawless 66 to win. 66. In the final round of the U.S. Open. That's not just skill. That's mental dominance. This was the most direct and damning torture of 1986 because it happened in real time, on the same course, on the same day. Floyd and Tway both entered the final round in contention. Both had a chance to win. Floyd, the older man who had just failed the week before, rose to the occasion. Tway, the young star with momentum and player of the year potential, crumbled under pressure. It was a direct, brutal case study. A live comparison that left no room for excuses. Floyd had steely mental toughness. Tway didn't. The gap wasn't physical. Both were talented ball strikers. The gap was psychological, and Tway couldn't close it. Floyd didn't torture Tway with words or trash talk. He tortured him by being everything Tway wasn't. Resilient, unshakable. Hey, closer. Someone who learned from failure instead of being destroyed by it. After the nightmare of 1986, Tway spent the next few years searching for himself. Searching for that that swing, searching for that confidence. In 1989, he finally got a victory at the Memorial Tournament. He beat two-time major champion Fuzzy Zoeller by 2 strokes. This should have been a triumphant return, a statement that he was back, that the kid from 1986 had grown into a consistent winner. Instead, Tway's post-round comments sounded like a confession. "I kind of forgot what it felt like to win," he admitted. Let that sink in. It had been less than 3 years since his Player of the Year season, less than 3 years since he was on top of the golf world, and already the quiet champion felt lost. He added that people had been hounding him about what was wrong with him. The questions never stopped. The expectations never eased. The torture was already complete. Even beating a top-tier competitor like Zoeller didn't feel like redemption. It felt hollow. It felt temporary, like a brief break in the storm rather than the end of it. Zoeller was a 2-time major champion, a respected player. Beating him should have meant something, but for Tway it was just a reminder of how far he'd fallen. 3 years earlier, he was winning majors. Now he was celebrating wins at regular tour events like they were miracles. Zoeller didn't hate Tway. He probably barely thought about him, but by simply being there, by being another legend Tway had to beat just to feel normal again, he reminded Tway of everything he'd lost. That 1989 win wasn't a comeback. It was a brief respite, a temporary high before the roller coaster plunged again, and it would plunge hard. After 1986, Bob Tway entered what can only be described as a long, self-inflicted psychological torture. The numbers tell the story. He won his first 4 PGA Tour events in just 6 months in 1986. Lightning fast. Then it took him another 17 seasons and 468 starts to win 4 more times. 17 years to match what he did in 6 months. That's not a slump. That's a collapse. The reason? Tway's biggest sin was seeking the perfect swing. He started tinkering, obsessively, endlessly. He couldn't leave his swing alone. Every time something went wrong, he changed something. New grip, new stance, new thought. He was chasing something he could never catch, trying to build a swing that could systematically produce miracles. In 1995, nearly a decade into his spiral, he summed up his entire career with one devastating line. "In the pursuit of getting better, I got worse." That's it. That's the whole tragedy in 9 words. He was trying to improve. He was working harder than ever, but instead of getting better, he deconstructed everything that made him great in the first place. He also admitted, "I didn't realize how much confidence means in this game until I didn't have any." Confidence is everything in golf. It's the difference between trusting your swing and second-guessing every move. Tway had lost that trust. Every shot became a question mark, but the most revealing quote came later. "I never thought I drove the ball well enough to win a US Open." Stop and think about that. This is the 1986 Player of the Year talking, the man who won the PGA Championship and finished tied for 8th at the US Open. Why would he think his driving wasn't good enough? Because he was comparing himself to Greg Norman. Norman was the best driver on tour, the guy who intimidated everyone with his power. Norman hit bombs off the tee that left other players shaking their heads. Tway's tinkering wasn't about abstract perfection. It was a direct reaction to the legends who had tortured him. He was trying to build Norman's power, Nicklaus's technical mastery, and Floyd's mental consistency. He wanted to be all 3 of them combined. In doing so, he deconstructed the very swing that made him a champion. The swing that won him 4 tournaments in 6 months. The swing that was good enough to be Player of the Year. He destroyed it, chasing an impossible ideal. Even when he won Comeback Player of the Year in 1995, it wasn't a solution. It was just another loop on the roller coaster, another temporary high before the inevitable crash. The psychological damage from 1986 was irreversible. The ghosts were too strong, the comparisons too brutal, the expectations too high. The psychological spiral reached its inevitable conclusion in 2005 at the Players' Championship. Tway was 46 years old. Most guys his age were thinking about the Champions Tour, but incredibly, he was in contention in the 3rd round, just 4 shots off the lead. A late career miracle was within reach. One more magical moment to bookend his career. One more chance to prove he belonged. Then came the 17th hole at TPC Sawgrass, the Island Green, the most intimidating par 3 in golf, and what followed was soul-destroying. His tee shot flew over the green and into the water. Okay, it happens. The hole is tough. He dropped. That shot also flew over the green into the water. Now it's getting bad. Then, overcompensating, his next 2 shots landed short. Also in the water. 4 balls in the water. 4. His 5th attempt, his 9th shot, finally found the green. Then he 3-putted from 40 feet. The final score was 12 on a par 3. It remains the highest score ever recorded on that hole in tournament history. Tway plummeted from contention to a tied 56th finish. The dream was over. The nightmare was complete. This wasn't just a bad hole. Bad holes happen to everyone. This was the catastrophic, inevitable implosion of a man who spent 19 years tinkering with his mechanics, battling mind games and losing his confidence. Every ball that splashed into the water was another ghost, another comparison, another reminder that he was never good enough to be them. 4 balls in the water, 4 legends who tortured him. The symmetry is almost poetic. The symmetry is perfect. Tragic, but perfect. The 1986 bunker shot was unconscious, reactive, unbelievable. It was pure luck that he could never replicate. A moment of joy built on a foundation of sand. He wasn't trying to make it. It just happened. Lightning in a bottle. The 2005 score of 12 is the opposite. It's not a fluke. It's the conscious meltdown of a broken man. Every decision he made that day was wrong. Every swing was torture. It's the final, definitive crash. crash after 19 years on a psychological roller coaster. Tway's career began with a miracle he couldn't live up to. It ended with a meltdown that perfectly captured the mental torture of his long, desperate pursuit. Greg Norman's dominance consumed him. The 561 gap proved he could never escape the shadow. Bernhard Langer set expectations he couldn't meet, forcing him to start at the top with nowhere to go but down. Jack Nicklaus made him invisible, teaching him that excellence without legend status is meaningless. Raymond Floyd exposed his mental gaps in real time, showing him exactly what he lacked. And even Fuzzy Zoller reminded him that winning no longer felt like it used to, that the joy was gone, replaced by hollow relief. These 5 legends didn't just beat Bob Tway, they broke him. They didn't need to say a word. They just had to be themselves. And in being themselves, they created a standard Tway could never reach. No matter how hard he tried, no matter how much he tinkered, no matter how desperately he chased perfection. From a miracle in the sand to a meltdown in the water, Bob Tway's story might be the purest example of how greatness can drive a man insane. So who do you think tortured Tway the most? Was it Norman's shadow or Nicklaus's roar? Drop your thoughts below. And if stories like this fascinate you, make sure to subscribe for more forgotten rivalries from golf's darkest corners.